but we are a power connector for the American-made network. We work closely with the Department of Energy on running several different programs. Particularly, y'all are joining us for this one. The Department of Energy runs a wide array of commercialization programs, and so we are particularly focused on the water and solar SBIRs that are currently out right now. So this is a part of that series. Next slide, please. We are one of several power connectors that support different initiatives within the American-made network. As you can see, there's several across the United States. So we serve companies that are participating in different prize programs, and this one is really focused on SBIRs and STTRs. Next slide. And these organizations are power connectors that are specifically supporting the SBIR STTR release that we're working with. So as you can see, Clean Energy Business Network, Entrepreneur Futures Network, Arrowhead Center, ADL, and then UACI. And we'll be sharing out the slides and this recording as well. So if you want more information on that. The next slide. Awesome. So this is part of our commercialization workshop series. So today we are focused on pathway to operational excellence. We have Shefali, who is our mentor in residence here at UACI. She will be presenting. And then next week, we'll be focused on funding strategy to wrap up our workshops.
Very excited to talk to you about operations and operations excellence, and some of the principles and key concepts that world's largest organizations and small organizations use to deliver superior quality product. So what I wanted to do today is follow sort of a similar format and theme in terms of a combination of foundational principles that we will talk about with some examples and templates. And what I also wanted to do is make sure that we start out with a key learning objective, which is understanding the link between strategy and operations. We talked last 2 times about one, product market fit. Second was strategy and organization. And I want to spend some time kind of just outlining the importance of resource allocation and the decisions that founders, entrepreneurs make in their startups of the day-to-day work in realizing that intended long-term strategy. As I said, we'll talk about some of the foundational ideas behind quality-focused operations. A key one is lean manufacturing that many of you may be familiar with. So I want to go through how lean manufacturing is done, some of the basic practices that operations follow. And then for today's scope, I want to stay focused on product and technology operations, i.e. building a process or building a prototype. Of course, as you know, operations excellence applies not only to product building, but also how you source your materials, how you process them, how you distribute and deliver to the customer. And it also, some of these principles also apply to your commercial work, which is sales and marketing. But today we want to talk specifically about product and technology. So for agenda, pretty simple. I want to do a quick recap of 2 key concepts from the first 2 sessions and then tie that to operations. And within operations excellence, I want to talk about lean manufacturing, specifically design of experiments. That is the life and blood of a startup as they go out to build a high quality product or improve a service. Really do want to talk about what is Six Sigma and how to deliver Six Sigma quality. I want to talk about the importance of visual management. This is a practice that really helps you internalize some of these concepts and put them in your daily rhythm. And that, of course, ties back to the lean organization in terms of how do you take big goals and objectives, and allocate your resources, time, money, people in running a lean organization. So that is the agenda for today. What we start out with are a couple of things. If you recall, in 2 weeks ago when we talked about product market fit, the discussion was more external about targeting the right customers for your sort of first early innovators and early adopters to try and drive that growth to maximize the revenue and capture the value that you've created through your product. In one very fundamental and obvious way to make sure that you are maximizing your revenue and retaining your customers for a long time is through making and delivering a great product or a great service. So it ties back to that operational excellence and quality. And then when we talked about competitive strategy and competitive advantage last week, I had shown this chart. It's a very famous way to structure the organization from the inside. And the way you add value through your company is first and foremost through the product you build, but implementation of very systematic business processes, starting from inbound logistics to marketing to sales, human resource management, as well as R&D. And what it helps you to do is to optimize your cost, again, to maximize the gap between revenue and cost so you can maximize your profit and allow you to differentiate your product through superior quality. So I wanted to make sure we recap those two things and tie it back to why operational excellence is so critical. First and foremost, it is about a quality mindset. Operational excellence is not just a pursuit for productivity improvement or cost reduction. It is about delivering and sustaining very, very high quality, which ultimately is tied to building an enduring organization and enduring brands. I wanted to share some quotes that ring true for a lot of us and household brands that are world-renowned. First and foremost by philosopher John Ruskin, who said, "Quality is never an accident. It's a result of intelligent and diligent effort, sustained over time. It is everyone's responsibility, from your interns to the highest levels of leadership. It is a mindset that everybody embraces and takes it to heart." And one that I like from Gucci is, what you remember at the end of the day is not the price you paid for a product, but the quality that you experienced. So I wanted to emphasize before we get into the nuts and bolts of operations that quality is what operational excellence is about. And one of the other charts that I wanted to share, and this is something that I have kept in mind as a manager when I kind of think about the process of strategy making that companies and entrepreneurs spend a lot of time on, which is sort of this box, deliberate strategy. It's the result of a highly analytical process which allows you to develop your go-to-market strategy. But ultimately what gets realized is the practice and the decision-making that goes into your resource allocation process. And the thing that drives all of these boxes are what we talked about earlier, is the company principles and values. So when you design your lean organization, you want to make sure the ideology of the company is very closely tied to the resource allocation process, which drives how you invest in your product and market development activities, and again, tightly linked to paying attention to some of the emerging feedback that you're taking from your customer discovery effort or your product development efforts, and then linking it back to the resource allocation process. As we've talked about before, operational excellence mindset is practiced through daily habits, and it's embraced by the entire organization. It not only allows you to lower your operating costs, but also reduce risk, any safety issues, as well as shorten customer delivery times. It is an ability of the company to optimize its processes from procurement to customer delivery, and it allows you to achieve high customer satisfaction. Today, we're going to talk about product development and manufacturing. As you know, the business process improvement that you apply in this part of your value chain also carries over to how you manage your suppliers, how you forecast your demand, how you distribute your product, and how you deliver it. And there can be systematic effort, and the principles that we talked about today can be extrapolated to design how you manage your suppliers, how you forecast your inventory needs, so on and so forth. Next, I want to talk about some of the tools that you can use to drive process improvement, very critically design of experiments and statistical process control. Also, how you change your processes once they are established. A very well-known methodology that's embraced by many organizations is called the Kaizen way. And it is a set of ideas and philosophies that we will go into. And the outcomes that these methods help you deliver are product consistency, reduced waste, reduced downtime, fewer safety incidents, and ultimately zero defects. What I wanted to kind of hone in on as we dive into the problem-solving approach that's typically taken when determining product improvement parameters is identified as define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And what I'd like to jump into is definition of design of experiments. As you know, any product that you're developing, whether it's coffee or a semiconductor chip, is defined by a set of attributes that are controlled by input variables. And design of experiments is a branch of applied statistics. It's practiced by companies of all kinds, especially technical ones, that entail planning an experiment, conducting it, analyzing the data, and interpreting the results to make sure that you are carefully analyzing the impact of independent variables or dependent variables and its impact on your end product. And what I wanted to show you here is an example of a factorial experiment. And ultimately what you're trying to do, say your product sweet spot is in the center of this cube. What you'd like to do through controlled set of DOEs is determine what the tolerances are by forcing certain conditions at extremities and be able to define the spec of the product. And to take that further, another idea that I wanted to include here is statistical process control, i.e. SPC. It's a method to monitor and control the performance of your product through implementation of limits. And by this, I mean, when you run a set of designed experiments to understand where your product operating window is, you will also determine limits of where it starts to fail. And through a series of experiments, you're able to determine what an upper limit is and what a lower limit is, between which your product has its ideal operating window. And what Six Sigma means is, when you have a mean for your parametric, a product parameter that is an average of its performance, you take a Six Sigma and establish your upper limit, and take Six Sigma on the negative direction and apply its lower limit. And what you want to make sure as you run your product and monitor its performance is that the parameter stays within those limits. Anything that's outside those parameters gets rejected. One of the critical aspects that I had experienced when we were running a startup was the importance of designing a very, very clear experiment plan that has the application of the scientific method. I defined goals, a defined hypothesis, metrics that you're going to measure, the variables you're going to change or modulate, and the expected outcome. And once that experiment plan is established, conducting it through proper documentation became very paramount. And over time, as you run these experiments, the data and knowledge that you'll accumulate through the experiments become core to what is your product specification. What I wanted to provide here is a specification template or a standard operating procedure for a given process that clarifies the purpose of that process step, the scope of the document, and the definition of the various terms that are used in the specification, as well as the parameters. And you arrive at a specification for a product through running a series of experiments that allow you to verify the operating window of a product. Next, I wanted to talk a bit about the importance of taking these principles and implementing them within your organization and how to practice lean. One of the very popular and commonly embraced methodologies is called OKRs. It was popularized by a gentleman named John Doerr of Kleiner Perkins. And it's something that allows you to, it's a very usable template that allows you to take your 3 or 5 year vision and break it down into annual milestones, determine quarterly objectives, assign projects to your team members, and agree on tangible deliverables and priorities. Another very useful template is a scorecard. This is typically also required when you take venture funding to report on your quarterly progress that allow you to kind of track if you're performing towards goal, you're behind goal, or ahead of the goal. Next, I wanted to talk about the importance of visual management. What we had found in our startup is that it became very critical when we started growing from a team of 3 to 4 to 10 to 14, that we needed to gather collectively through a 15-minute stand-up meeting to make sure that there was very clear communication between the members of the team on what needed to happen that day and increase the say-do ratio. It was very important also to make sure that these goals were visually tracked and were posted in our facilities. That way everybody could gather around and recognize the ownership not only of the person who owned the task, but the team members that were assigned other tasks. And it allowed us to sort of establish a way of working together day in and day out and make sure that we were staying abreast of the deliverables that we had promised to our stakeholders. And over time, it started becoming a habit. Document control is another very critical aspect of running a kind of tight ship or a startup. And I wanted to offer a few critical documents that you need as a startup organization. And a few examples here are what's called a product requirement document. This is something that you would develop through your customer discovery efforts. And a subset of that document could be a product specification. There are specifications for product design as well as process. Another very important document is what's known as a process change notice. This is actually a very critical operation or a process to implement once you have frozen your recipe or a product development fabrication step, because any changes that you make have to go through a set of approvals and verifications before you actually implement the warranted change. Standard operating procedures or SOPs are critical for lab equipment, facilities. Supplier checklists include toolset specification, contracts that you've designed in collaboration with your providers, maintenance schedules, inventory checklists. And then for facilities, it was very critical to make sure that you had documented plans for safety audits, compliance audits, as well as safety training. Again, I wanted to kind of wrap our discussion with reminding ourselves that designing quality first is the only way to achieve operational excellence. And it is such a big topic and it's such a critical one that when you are at the right size and have the right sufficient funds, it would be best to hire a quality-focused operations leader. And with that, I wanted to offer a couple references. One very famous book is The Toyota Way. Another one that I was handed in my earlier days it's a book called The Goal. And a newer one by John Doerr is called Measure What's Matter. It has a detailed explanation of the OKR methodology and is a very widely used practice, especially by venture capitalists.